A day in the life of a gladiator, drifting into the ancient arena. Imagine yourself settling comfortably into bed, feeling the weight of the day begin to loosen, as though it were dust slipping from your shoulders. Tonight, we'll drift quietly into a distant world, one that is often imagined with roaring crowds and clashing steel, but which, beneath the surface, moved with long stretches of routine, of quiet preparation, of steady rhythms that filled the lives of the people within it. In tonight's gentle historical journey, we'll be exploring the slow textured details of a day in the life of a Roman gladiator. Not the spectacle of combat or the burst of adrenaline that popular stories linger on, but instead the subtle, almost meditative cadence of their daily existence, their mornings, their meals, their training, and the quiet thoughts that might have accompanied them as they moved through the enclosed world of the ludus, the gladiator school. You won't need to hold on to every fact. There's no quiz at the end, no expectation to stay fully awake. Let the details drift as they will. Some may stay with you, others may dissolve gently into the edges of sleep. Our goal is simply to offer a calm window into the past, one that is steady, comforting, and rich with the soft texture of ancient life. And so, as you breathe a little deeper, we begin our unhurried walk through a gladiator's world. Picture yourself inside the thick stone walls of a gladiator school in the early hours of the morning. Before the sun lifts itself fully over the horizon, the air is cool and faintly tinged with the earthy scent of the packed training yard. The ludus is quieter than you might expect, not silent, but resting. It carries the soft hush of a community preparing for another day of repetition and discipline. Most gladiators slept in long communal barracks, simple wooden bunks arranged in rows, each one holding a thin mattress stuffed with straw. The waking moments were slow ones, a shift of fabric, the creak of wood, the steady breathing of dozens of men easing themselves back into consciousness. The dim glow of dawn filtered through narrow windows high on the walls, casting soft lines of light across the room. The rhythm of their lives often began before the city outside had truly stirred. Their mornings were structured with an almost monastic consistency. First came the quiet routine of dressing, slipping into tunics that were worn but maintained, tying belts, adjusting sandals. The movements were purposeful, practiced over many months or even years, part of a ritual that shaped their identity long before they ever stepped into the arena. As the barracks slowly emptied, the sounds of the ludus awakened. The muffled thud of footsteps on packed earth, the faint clatter of wooden weapons stacked neatly in racks, a low murmur of voices exchanging simple greetings, not energetic or rushed, but steady, the kind of communication born from familiarity and the shared understanding of the day ahead. Breakfast was practical rather than indulgent. Bread with coarse texture, perhaps softened with a drizzle of inexpensive olive oil, sometimes accompanied by barley porridge. The flavors were simple, but the meal served its purpose, to create a sense of grounding before the hours of training that lay ahead. Imagine the warm, muted aroma of the porridge rising from clay bowls, mingling with the cool morning air. The room was filled not with lively conversation, but with the soft, rhythmic sounds of chewing, of clay cups being set gently onto wooden tables, of deep breaths preparing for exertion. Outside, the training yard gradually brightened. Sunlight touched the tops of the wooden beams surrounding the practice area, casting elongated shadows across the sand trainers. Experienced fighters known as doctores walked slowly through the space, assessing the condition of the equipment, testing the grain of wooden swords, and observing the fighters as they arrived. There was no rush. Everything unfolded at its own pace, measured and deliberate like a quiet river following its familiar path. The men stretched their arms and legs, warming muscles that had endured years of repetition. The sound of sand shifting beneath their feet formed a soft, consistent whisper, almost like the faint turning of pages in a large, ancient book. While the popular imagination may picture a gladiator's morning filled with tension or restless anxiety, the truth was far more grounded. Their world was built around routine, a series of predictable steps that brought structure and focus. The arena itself, with all its intensity, existed outside these walls, like a distant thunder that one could hear but did not need to confront every day. As the sun finally lifted above the horizon, warming the yard with a gentle glow, the day officially began. Wooden swords were lifted, shields were strapped into place, and the steady rhythm of training, methodical, repetitive, and deeply physical, started once again. A gladiator's life was not only defined by the moments of combat, but by this quiet, persistent routine. This was the world they knew best, a world of repetition, a world of discipline, a world where each morning unfolded much like the one before it, creating a kind of meditative stability within the walls of the ludus. And with the morning now fully settled, we can ease gently into the next part of our journey, exploring the life of a specific gladiator who lived within this world. As the day gently unfolds within the ludus, imagine narrowing our focus to a single figure, one gladiator among many, whose life reflects the slow currents, the expectations, and the quiet uncertainties of this world. We'll call him Gaius Primus, a name rooted in simplicity, one common enough that it doesn't draw our attention with too much force. It allows him to remain both an individual and a soft representation of many who lived lives much like his. Gaius was not born into this profession. Few were. Most gladiators came from wide and varied backgrounds. Some were enslaved, others prisoners of war, others condemned men, and a smaller number, surprisingly, chose this life willingly, drawn by the structure, the training, or the chance at steady food and shelter. Gaius belonged to the first group, having been sold into the ludus in his late 20s, a time when many men began to settle into predictable routines of family and work. For Gaius, the trajectory of his life shifted in a way he had not foreseen, yet he adapted with quiet diligence. As we watch him begin his day, his movements are calm and unhurried. His tunic hangs loosely over a frame built through months of training, the muscles shaped not by vanity, but by repetition, lifting weights fashioned from stone, practicing footwork in long circular patterns, learning to move with steady control. His face holds the softness of someone long accustomed to early mornings and physical routines, with lines etched not from dramatic struggle, but from long exposure to sun, wind, and years of steady effort. Trainers often described Gaius as observant rather than ambitious. He paid attention to the small details of daily life, the texture of the sand beneath his feet, the way a wooden sword carried its weight differently after a day of use, the tone of the doctor's voice when giving instruction. It was in these subtle observations that he found a sense of anchor, a quiet rhythm amid the unpredictable future that awaited all gladiators. Today, like most days, his training begins with armatura levis, light exercises meant to warm the body gradually. He moves through them with measured precision, not rushing, not straining, but following the slow, dependable cadence he has internalized over time. Knees bending gently, shoulders rolling back in smooth rotations, his breath steady and controlled, rising and falling with confidence born from repetition. As the morning stretches forward, Gaius transitions into weapon drills. For him, the choice of weapon is the gladius, the short Roman sword. While popular culture often focuses on its swift, lethal uses, the reality of training with such a weapon involved hours of controlled practice, striking wooden posts called pila, stepping forward and backward in gentle arcs, repeating the same small motions again and again. Imagine the soft rhythmic thuds as sword meets post, gentle enough not to startle, repetitive enough to feel like the beating of a slow, steady drum. Around him, other gladiators move through their own routines. Some train with nets and tridents, others with curved swords or heavy shields. The diversity of fighting styles created a fascinating landscape of movement. Circles, lines, diagonals, each man tracing patterns that reflected the role he would one day take in the arena. For Gaius, though, the focus remains internal. His world narrows to the quiet rhythm of practice: step, strike, breathe, step, strike, breathe. A pattern that makes the hours pass as smoothly as flowing water. When the trainers call for a pause, the men retreat to shaded edges of the yard, drinking water from clay jugs and resting their hands on their knees. Conversations remain soft and sparse. Some men share quiet jokes. Others sit in silence, eyes drifting across the sunlit sand. Gaius often found these breaks grounding, moments where the demands of training slipped away, replaced by the simple awareness of breath, warmth, and the shared company of others who understood this life. Each man carried his own story, his own path that led him here. Yet within the walls of the ludus, those stories blended into a shared, steady rhythm, a rhythm that shaped who they were, day after day. As we follow Gaius through this gentle stretch of his day, we begin to glimpse not the gladiator of dramatic tales, but the human being who lived within a contained world of repetition, companionship, and quiet resilience. Soon, we will drift into a different layer of this ancient world, one not defined by individuals, but by the mysteries and cultural details that surrounded gladiators and the world that watched them. As Gaius Primus returns to the training yard, the sun now a gentler presence high above, let your mind drift slightly beyond the routine of his day. Imagine the broader world that surrounded him, one shaped by layers of history, quiet mysteries, and the subtle details uncovered by archaeologists centuries later. These traces, found in the stillness of earth and stone, give us glimpses into the lived experience of men like Gaius, not through the noise of combat, but through the artifacts and faint imprints their daily lives left behind. Picture the ludus from above, long rectangular buildings arranged around a central yard, walls thick enough to soften the sounds within. Archaeological sites, such as the famous Ludus Magnus near the Colosseum, reveal outlines that echo the quiet routines we've been imagining. The floor plans of barracks, training areas, storerooms, and small courtyards that once held the steady murmur of voices and the rhythmic tap of practice. When excavations first uncovered these structures, archaeologists found small items scattered in places where men once walked. A fragment of a wooden practice sword, worn smooth with used clay oil lamps that once cast their warm, flickering light across stone floors. Simple bowls, their surfaces scratched from years of meals eaten in calm repetition. Each object, though unremarkable at first glance, carries a gentle whisper of someone's presence. An unnamed gladiator who lived, trained, and rested within those very walls. And then there are the inscriptions, names carved into stone or scratched onto plaster walls. Not dramatic declarations, but quiet marks of identity. Some recorded victories. Many were simply names, single words that helped a man affirm his existence within a world that often saw fighters as interchangeable Felix, Secundus, Marcellus, each name a soft reminder of an individual life, once lived with its own cadence. One of the more intriguing discoveries is the evidence of medical practices within the ludus. Gladiators, contrary to some modern misconceptions, received attentive medical care. Archaeological excavations have revealed small surgical tools, delicate instruments that suggest skilled hands once tended to injuries with calm precision. Specialists, known as medici, worked within the gladiator schools, using salves, herbs, and gentle treatments to help men recover enough to resume training. The presence of these tools offers a glimpse into a quieter aspect of gladiator life. Moments spent in dimly lit rooms, a medic applying a healing balm or wrapping a bandage with careful patience. Not sensational, not dramatic. Just another part of the slow, textured rhythm of existence inside the ludus. Another subtle mystery lies in the gladiator's diet. Written accounts and modern analysis of bone remains both suggest that gladiators were sometimes referred to as hordearii, meaning barley men. Their meals, simple and repetitive, often centered around grain-based foods like barley porridge, supplemented with legumes and a special drink made from vinegar and ash. While the combination may sound unusual today, it was valued in their time for strengthening the body, replenishing minerals, and aiding recovery after strenuous training. Imagine standing in the small kitchen area of the ludus, feeling the warm steam rising from a pot of thick barley, the scent mild and earthy, drifting through the cool air of early evening. Some of the most mysterious details come from burial sites associated with gladiators, quiet resting places where archaeologists discovered grave markers with small carvings of helmets, shields, or palm branches. These symbols, though modest, were meant to honor the individual, acknowledging the path they walked. They offer a soft contrast to the intensity imagined in the arena, reminding us that even those who live such structured, demanding lives were remembered in gentle, symbolic ways. As the archaeological lens widens, we see the cultural environment that shaped Gaius's world. In Roman society, gladiators occupied a curious space, both celebrated and marginalized, admired for their discipline, yet kept separate from everyday life. Their existence was woven into the fabric of Roman entertainment, but their personal lives remained, for many, hidden and quiet. This contrast forms a subtle, almost haunting rhythm: public spectacle, private routine, widespread fascination, yet personal anonymity. The echo of cheering crowds countered by the soft footsteps in the sand of the training yard. And as these layers settle in your imagination, you may notice a gentle shift, a transition from the archaeological and mysterious back toward the humans living these lives. For now, we drift back toward the ludus, where the day is beginning to move toward its later hours. As the afternoon sunlight softens and begins its slow descent across the walls of the ludus, imagine Gaius Primus pausing in a shaded corner of the training yard. He wipes a faint sheen of sweat from his brow, not hurriedly, but with the unbothered calm that comes from routine. The day continues in its familiar rhythm, yet beyond these walls lies a world with its own pace, its own priorities, one that often seemed strangely distant from the lives of the men inside the gladiator school. To understand the world of the gladiator fully, it helps to drift gently outward into the surrounding streets of ancient Rome. Just beyond the ludus, the city's daily life unfolds with a hum that seldom reached the training yard. Merchants arrange their goods beneath awnings, calling softly to passers-by. Bakers slide loaves of warm bread from clay ovens, the scent of wheat drifting across the air. Children weave between the crowds, their laughter light and wandering, and men of wealth, adorned in fine fabrics, walk with the slow confidence of those whose lives were shaped not by the rigor of discipline, but by the security of status. This contrast between the controlled world of the ludus and the free-flowing streets of Rome creates a quiet tension, one that gladiators would have lived with every day. Their movements were restricted, their schedules fixed. The outside world, though tantalizingly close, remained out of reach except on rare occasions, such as medical outings, supervised errands, or formal appearances related to upcoming games. For the elites of Roman society, gladiators held a unique fascination. To some senators and wealthy patrons, they represented an idealized version of discipline and strength. To others, they were performers, figures who embodied an exaggerated sense of danger, yet lived their lives under strict control. Many of the elites admired gladiators from afar, attending the games with an almost detached curiosity. They talked of famous fighters the way modern audiences might discuss athletes, quietly comparing skills, victories, and styles, forming opinions based on stories carried through the city like drifting smoke. And yet, despite this fascination, gladiators were often seen as socially inferior. They occupied a space that was neither entirely respected nor dismissed. Instead, they existed in a layered world where admiration and exclusion intertwined. A wealthy Roman might cheer for a fighter in the arena, yet hesitate to dine beside him at a banquet. A young aristocrat might secretly practice gladiator moves in the privacy of his home, imagining himself strong and fearless, but never consider stepping inside a real training yard. This contrast shaped the emotional landscape of many gladiators. For some, the attention felt distant, almost unreal, something that happened far beyond the walls of the ludus, removed from their steady lives of training, eating, resting, and repeating. For others, the attention created a small spark of pride, a quiet acknowledgement that their discipline meant something to people they would never meet. Occasionally, groups of spectators would visit the training grounds. These visits were not chaotic events, but rather controlled, almost ceremonial occasions. Guests, usually wealthy patrons or individuals of status, were allowed to observe the men as they trained. They stood behind low wooden barriers, watching with a mixture of interest and detachment. Some whispered to each other, offering quiet commentary. Others simply observed, their gaze following the steady movements of the fighters. For someone like Gaius, these moments could feel slightly surreal. The regular sounds of training continued, the thud of wooden swords, the shifting of sand, the low instructions from trainers, but the presence of outsiders added a faint shift in the atmosphere. The visitors often carried the scent of expensive oils or perfumes, a stark contrast to the earthy, familiar smells of the ludus. Their clothing, woven in rich colors and delicate textures, seemed to glow softly in the afternoon light, highlighting just how different their lives were from those of the men they observed. As the visitors departed, their sandals clicking softly against the stone walkways, the ludus returned to its usual quiet rhythm. The men resumed their training without much conversation, as though the glimpse of another world had been nothing more than a gentle passing breeze. This interplay between the structured, disciplined life of the gladiator and the vibrant, layered life of those outside the walls creates a subtle backdrop to our story. It's a reminder that even in ancient times, social boundaries shaped daily experiences just as strongly as physical walls. And as the late afternoon deepens, drawing shadows across the yard, the world inside the ludus slowly prepares for the quieter hours of evening. As the sun drifts lower in the sky, turning the training yard sand a muted shade of gold, the pace of the ludus shifts almost imperceptibly. The air cools, the voices soften, the hours of training slowly release their hold, much like a long exhale at the end of a tiring day. Gaius Primus finishes his final set of movements, one last, slow, deliberate sequence with the wooden sword, and lowers the practice weapon with a calm sense of completion. His arms feel heavy, not with strain, but with the familiar weight of a day well spent. Around him, other men pause in similar states of quiet fatigue, not exhaustion. Just a gentle settling, like sand after a breeze fades. The trainers, the doctors, walk through the yard with a slower stride now. Their instructions for the day have been delivered, repeated, refined. Evening gives them permission to shift into observation rather than correction. They nod to the men, offering subtle signs of approval. Nothing grand, merely a small recognition that the daily rhythm has been upheld. As the fighters return the wooden swords to their racks, the soft clatter of the equipment feels like a kind of evening song, marking the transition from discipline to rest. The men file back into the main building, moving with the quiet single-mindedness of people who have performed this routine hundreds of times. The stone corridors carry their footsteps in muted echoes, each one softened by centuries of repetition. Inside, the dining room is lit by small clay lamps, their warm glow flickering against the smooth plaster walls. The light is gentle, steady, comforting. Dinner is served in simple wooden bowls, most likely a barley stew thickened to fill the stomach, served with bread and perhaps a modest portion of vegetables. The aromas are warm and familiar, carrying hints of herbs and softened grain. The men eat without hurry. Conversation flows softly, kept to those low, steady tones that fill a room without disturbing the mind. Some discuss the day's drills in abstract, uncomplicated ways. Others simply sit in silence, their attention drifting toward their meal or toward the slow dance of the lamplight. For someone like Gaius, these quiet dinners offer a sense of grounding. While training demanded focus and bodily discipline, the evening provided something gentler, a moment to simply exist among others who understood this life intimately. A shared bowl of food, the soft scrape of wooden spoons, the faint shifting of bodies settling comfortably on benches. All of it created an atmosphere that soothed rather than stimulated. After the meal, the men often tended to their gear. This was not dramatic preparation for combat, but rather calm maintenance. Leather straps were checked, tunics were shaken free of dust, practice weapons inspected for cracks. A medic might approach certain fighters, offering a salve for sore shoulders or wrapping a joint with soft linen. These interactions were quiet, procedural, almost tender in their straightforward practicality. Outside, the evening deepens. The sounds of Rome drift faintly into the ludus, the distant call of a merchant closing shop, the soft clatter of hooves along a main road, a group of neighbors exchanging low conversations as they settle into their own evenings. These sounds create a soft backdrop, reminding the men that life continues beyond the walls, even as their world remains carefully contained. Some fighters might stroll the edge of the training yard before returning to their barracks, enjoying the coolness of the air and the gradual dimming of the sky. Gaius sometimes stood quietly near the wooden fence, looking out at the narrow strip of open sky visible above the wall. He rarely thought deeply about what lay beyond the ludus. Instead, he simply observed the shifts of light, the formation of early stars, the calm arrival of night. Back in the barracks, the transition into rest begins slowly. Men adjust their straw-filled mattresses, fold their tunics neatly at the foot of their beds, and settle beneath simple blankets. The room fills with the soft rustling of fabric, the steady rhythm of breathing, and the peaceful stillness of bodies winding down. The lamps are gradually extinguished one by one until only the faint glow of moonlight brushes against the edges of the room. The day's exertion gives way to a gentle stillness, a stillness familiar to every gladiator who has lived this life, night after night. In this quiet darkness, the ludus becomes a place of almost monastic serenity. The chaos that many associate with the world of gladiators remains far away. What lingers here instead is routine, companionship, and the slow, steady heartbeat of lives shaped by discipline. And as the final murmurs fade into silence, the ancient world itself seems to take a soft breath, preparing for another day to come. As night settles softly over the ludus, imagine the atmosphere inside the barracks shifting from quiet conversation to deeper stillness. Lamps are extinguished, blankets pulled up, and the room settles into a slow cadence of breathing, some steady, some slightly uneven from the day's exertion. It is in these gentle, in-between hours that a gladiator's emotional world becomes most visible, not through dramatic turmoil, but through small, contemplative thoughts that surface when the body finally rests. For Gaius Primus, this time of night was often the only space where his mind wandered freely. During daylight, his focus remained on repetition, movement, form, breath, instruction, but nighttime, wrapped in the muted shadows of the barracks, offered a different rhythm, a softer one, a quieter one. He might lie on his straw mattress, hands resting loosely on his abdomen, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles. The ache wasn't painful. It was a steady, grounding sensation, something that reminded him of the structure that shaped his life. As he stared up at the dim ceiling, the cool night air drifting gently across the room, small thoughts drifted in and out without urgency. Some memories surfaced in fragments, faces from years before the ludus, places he had once walked freely, meals enjoyed without schedule or supervision. The memories came not with longing or despair, but with a detached softness, like scenes from a distant dream that warm the mind before dissolving again. Other times, his thoughts turned toward the men around him. Even in the darkness, he could sense their presence, the familiar rustle of a blanket, the shifting of weight, the quiet sighs that signaled sleep approaching. These sounds formed a kind of unspoken bond. Each man carried private histories, private concerns, yet within the ludus, they all shared the same rhythms, the same routines, the same simple moments of reflection before rest. Despite the world's perception of gladiators as fierce or fearless, their emotional landscape was often steady, practical, and subdued. Living within walls that dictated the flow of each day encouraged a certain resignation, not defeat, but acceptance. A quiet understanding that life, like training, unfolded in repeated cycles. Morning, practice, meal, rest, night, and again. For some, this structure brought comfort. The predictability offered stability. Each day, though similar to the one before, felt manageable. For others, the walls of the ludus brought a subtle sense of distance. Distance from old lives, from old ambitions, from the broader world just outside their reach. But rarely did these feelings flare into strong emotion. The environment of the ludus shaped thoughts into something smoother, quieter. Even uncertainty slid into the background, softened by the weight of routine. Gaius sometimes thought about the arena, but not often in the way people today might imagine. He didn't lie awake picturing dramatic battles or roaring crowds. Instead, his mind drifted toward the small details, the feel of sand beneath his feet, the warmth of sunlight on the top of his helmet, the steady rhythm of breath inside his chest. These thoughts weren't frightening or invigorating. They were simply part of the landscape of his life, a distant horizon, something not yet present, but always somewhere ahead. He understood in a calm, measured way that his path might eventually lead there. But he also knew that tonight, in this moment, such concerns could rest. As he closed his eyes, the room around him grew quieter still. The gentle rustle of straw, the soft whistle of breath from a nearby bunk, a faint night breeze slipping through a small window high above the beds. These sounds formed a soothing tapestry, one that wrapped itself around each man and carried them toward sleep. In this stillness, the emotional world of a gladiator reveals itself not through intensity, but through subtlety, little thoughts, softened memories, quiet acceptance, a life lived within walls, shaped by discipline, yet rich with interior calm. And as Gaius drifts into sleep, the night deepens around him, holding the ludus in an embrace of quiet continuity. As dawn approaches once more, the ludus rests beneath a pale early light. The air is cool and still, carrying with it the faint sense of earth, sand, and the lingering smoke from last night's oil lamps. A gentle calm settles over the buildings, revealing the physical textures of this world. Textures that shape the daily experiences of gladiators in ways both subtle and constant. Before the men fully rise, imagine walking slowly through the training yard. The sand underfoot is firm near the edges, softer near the center where countless footsteps have churned it into a light, even consistency. When the sun is low, the grains catch the light like soft, muted amber, shifting in small patterns with the breeze. This sand was the foundation of countless hours of movement, absorbing each step, each pivot, each controlled strike. The wooden posts used for practice, the pila, stand in quiet rows like worn sentinels. Their surfaces are dented and smoothed by repeated contact, carrying faint marks left by wooden swords over weeks and months. Running your fingers along one of them, you might feel an unexpected softness beneath the rough exterior, the result of constant friction, a reminder of how repetition shapes not only men but the tools they use. Nearby, racks of weapons line one side of the yard. Practice swords carved from heavy wood hang alongside shields fashioned with simple reinforcing bands. In the dimness of early morning, these objects appear almost sculptural, shadows cast across their surfaces, outlining their shapes without highlighting their harshness. They do not feel threatening here. They simply exist, patiently waiting for the day's routine. Inside the armory, the air is cooler. The stone walls hold the chill of the night, creating a space where metallic objects take on a muted gleam. Real helmets, kept on shelves for inspection and maintenance, bear the soft marks of wear. Their contours, designed not for ornamentation but for practicality, curve in gentle arcs that catch the morning light. Some feature grills of iron bars, others a smooth, rounded faceplate. The faint scent of oiled leather and metal lingers in the room, a grounded, earthy mixture that speaks to years of care rather than conflict. Run your hand over a shield, and you would feel the texture of layered wood covered in stretched leather. The surface is taut but not polished, offering slight give beneath firm pressure. Along the edges, metal rims provide reinforcement. These objects were built to endure, yet their presence here, resting silently in the armory, feels peaceful rather than menacing. Gaius Primus, rising for another day, moves through this physical environment with quiet familiarity. Each item he touches, his belt, his training tunic, the worn leather of his sandals, carries its own subtle story, shaped not by dramatic moments, but by small daily interactions. The fabric of his tunic, softened by repeated washing, brushes lightly against his skin. His sandals creak faintly as he tightens their straps. These sensations are not remarkable, yet they form the tactile backdrop of his entire existence. Even the temperature of the morning shapes his routine. The coolness on his arms, the slight warmth of the wooden bench he sits on, the first rays of sunlight slowly spilling across the yard. All of these sensory details contribute to a rhythm that guides him through the day. He feels the shift from cold stone floors to soft sand. He notices the gentle resistance of the training post beneath each controlled strike. He registers the steady weight of a practice shield on his arm, not with complaint, but with the acceptance born from repetition. As the morning brightens further, sounds emerge that blend with the physical landscape. The distant clatter of pots in the kitchen, the muted voices of trainers preparing for the day, the soft shuffle of straw as men rise from their beds. These sounds create an atmosphere that is both grounded and soothing, like a low hymn humming through the stone walls. Every object and surface within the ludus, from sand to wood to iron, interacts with the men who live there, subtly shaping their bodies, their routines, and their sense of the world. For Gaius and the others, these textures are more familiar than the bustling streets of Rome or the whispers of the crowd beyond the arena walls. Within these physical surroundings, the life of a gladiator unfolds not in dramatic leaps, but in calm, grounded repetition. Each step, each object, each surface contributes to the meditative rhythm of their days. As the morning light continues its gradual ascent and the ludus stirs fully awake, the quiet interactions among the men begin to form the soft social backdrop of another day. Gladiator schools, though disciplined and controlled, were also homes to complex human relationships, woven from necessity, routine, and the subtle shared experiences of daily life. Gaius Primus moves through the barracks with an easy familiarity, offering small nods to the men he passes. These gestures, understated and calm, carry more significance than their simplicity suggests. In a life shaped by repetition and containment, even a brief moment of recognition, meeting someone's eyes, acknowledging their presence, can become a steadying force. One of the men he often trains beside is a former auxiliary soldier named Titus Varro. Titus is older than most, with a calm, deliberate pace that mirrors the soft rhythm of the ludus itself. He speaks infrequently, but when he does, his voice carries a quiet weight, shaped by years of experience. He and Gaius rarely have long conversations, yet their silent cooperation during drills creates an unspoken trust. When they train together, their movements tend to sync naturally, forming a pattern that feels both efficient and strangely comforting. Nearby, a younger fighter named Marcellus brings a different energy. Though he speaks more often, his tone remains gentle, never rising loud enough to disturb the morning calm. He asks simple questions about footwork, about equipment, about how to breathe more steadily during long drills. His curiosity is earnest, but his demeanor stays soft, shaped by the understanding that every man here is learning, adjusting, and adapting in his own way. Gaius answers him occasionally, offering brief practical advice without thinking of himself as a teacher. It is simply part of living together in a place where skill and survival rely on shared knowledge. The social bonds inside the ludus were not always defined by friendship in the modern sense. Instead, they emerged through routines, eating side by side, exercising in tandem, tending to each other's minor injuries, or simply standing quietly together at the edge of the training yard as the sky shifted from morning to afternoon. These subtle points of connection created a form of camaraderie rooted more in shared experience than in outward emotion. There were rivalries, too, though not the dramatic clashes one might imagine. They were quieter, influenced by personality rather than hostility. Some men preferred solitude and spoke only when necessary. Others held themselves with a confidence that sometimes clashed with their peers' patience. But even these tensions remained contained, softened by the strict structure of daily life. Any rivalry that existed was tempered by routine, by the need to train, to eat, to sleep, and to endure the same cycles together. The medics and trainers formed another layer of the social world. The medici, moving softly through the barracks with their small boxes of herbs and linens, often knew the men's quiet worries better than anyone else. They tended to sore shoulders, strained joints, or small cuts with gentle hands, their presence calm and methodical. To many fighters, these medics brought a sense of reassurance, a reminder that within the harshness of discipline there existed steady, careful care. The doctors or trainers carried themselves with a reserved authority. Their leadership was not loud or forceful. Instead, it flowed from years of experience, delivered through measured speech and careful observation. They rarely needed to raise their voices. A nod of approval or a slight correction of posture was enough to communicate everything necessary. Their presence, steady and unobtrusive, shaped the emotional climate of the ludus. Structured, calm, predictable. Occasionally, moments of simple leisure appeared among the men. A few might gather near the well to discuss topics unrelated to training. Childhood memories, quiet hopes, passing observations. Someone might hum a small tune under his breath. Another might carve a simple pattern into a piece of wood during an evening hour before sleep. These actions, though understated, formed a vital part of the social fabric, reminders that even within strict routines, small threads of individual identity continued to exist. For Gaius, the bonds he formed were gentle ones, trust built from familiarity, not intensity. He valued the steady presence of men like Titus, the earnest energy of Marcellus, and the quiet guidance of the trainers. These relationships, subtle and unspoken, anchored him within the walls of the ludus, creating a sense of belonging in a life shaped by constraint. As midday approaches and the sun climbs higher into the sky, the social landscape settles into its familiar rhythm. Men return to their drills, sharing the muted, communal focus that guides every day. And within this steady flow, the bonds they share, quiet, practical, and deeply human, continue to shape the emotional contours of their world. As the afternoon unfolds and the ludus hums with its steady, familiar cadence, it becomes easier to sense the faint presence of something larger just beyond its walls. The world of Rome, vast, layered, and endlessly active, moves with a rhythm entirely its own, one that quietly shapes the lives of the men inside, even when they cannot see it directly. Imagine stepping to the outer edge of the training yard with Gaius Primus, pausing for a moment where the wall rises high above his shoulder. From this vantage, only the uppermost hints of the city are visible, a sliver of sky interrupted by the outline of distant rooftops, the soft movement of smoke drifting upward from evening cooking fires, the fading echo of merchants calling to late shoppers along crowded streets. Rome itself was a city in constant motion. Even at this time of day, when the heat begins to soften and people wander homeward, the streets would still carry the murmuring tide of daily life, vendors closing stalls with soft wooden clacks, carts rolling across stone, wheels whispering against uneven ruts, neighbors exchanging brief end-of-day words in low tones. It was a world of thousands of small sounds, blending into a constant, subdued hum. For those living inside the ludus, this distant hum served as a reminder that life outside continued uninterrupted, untouched by the structure of gladiator routines. It created a quiet contrast, not sharp or painful, but gently persistent. The awareness of two parallel worlds moving side by side. The people of Rome held their own layered views of gladiators. The lower classes often admired them not only for perceived bravery, but for the disciplined strength that came from living under such demanding routines. Some even carved small figurines shaped like helmets or swords, sold cheaply in markets as tokens of admiration. These trinkets, though simple, reflect a softer kind of fascination, not the roaring spectacle of the arena, but a quiet appreciation for skill and endurance. Wealthy Romans, too, noticed the men of the ludus, though their attention tended to take the form of structured patronage. Senators or nobles might sponsor fighters, providing funds for equipment or special food. Their interest often came from a desire to display generosity and influence, discussed in calm tones at private dinners, far removed from the realities of life inside gladiator walls. Some Roman women were known to admire gladiators as well, creating a gentle cultural tension. Stories, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes rooted in truth, circulated about women of status writing letters to certain fighters or attending the games with an unusually attentive gaze. Yet, for the gladiators themselves, these distant admirations rarely shaped daily life. They remained part of the larger world's quiet fascination, something heard about in hushed whispers, but seldom felt directly. Then there was the looming presence of the arena, the Colosseum, or smaller amphitheaters in other cities. Even from afar, these structures held an immense symbolic weight. Their curved walls cast long shadows across the landscape, reminding all who lived nearby of the events that unfolded within. For Gaius, the arena existed like a distant horizon, something he knew he might eventually face but did not think about constantly. Much like a river flowing far from view, its presence was steady, but not intrusive. Inside the ludus, trainers occasionally discussed upcoming games in calm, measured tones, not with urgency or fear, but with the same pragmatic focus they applied to all routines. They talked about schedules, travel arrangements, and which fighters might participate. These conversations often drifted through the halls like gentle breezes, present but not disruptive. Rome's expectations shaped this world, but the shaping occurred in quiet ways. Through the allocation of grain rations for the school, through the repair and reinforcement of training equipment, through the steady recruitment of new fighters, sometimes sourced from military units, sometimes from provinces beyond Italy. Each decision formed a thread connecting the ludus to the greater currents of Roman society. And yet, from the perspective of a man like Gaius, these influences often felt distant. His life was defined not by the arena's future roar, but by the current rhythm of training, meals, maintenance, and rest. Though the world outside moved with expansive energy, his days unfolded within this structured environment, predictable, contained, and strangely peaceful in their repetition. As the late afternoon shadows lengthen across the training yard, the quiet fluctuations of Rome continue beyond the walls. Families preparing meals, officials settling into evening duties, travelers entering the city before the gates close. Life inside and life outside remain connected, but each follows its own steady course, influencing the other in subtle, unhurried ways. As evening deepens once more within the ludus, a subtle shift begins to ripple through the routines of the men. It is not dramatic, not charged with tension, but rather a quiet awareness, an understanding that for some of them, the time to enter the arena may be drawing closer. The approach of the games, though still softened by distance and uncertainty, casts a gentle shadow across their thoughts. For Gaius Primus, this awareness exists much like a faint horizon line, present but not pressing. The structure of the ludus encourages a sense of calm detachment. Each day unfolds with the same reliable sequence, and even the notion of the arena fits neatly into that rhythm, appearing when the time comes and fading again into the background afterward. The trainers discuss the possibility of upcoming games in steady, neutral tones. They review lists, assess the condition of each fighter, and determine who may be ready to participate. Their evaluations are methodical, grounded in years of experience. No drama, no urgency, only the familiar cadence of preparation. When a fighter is selected for potential participation, his routine changes only slightly. He may be asked to practice with his real helmet instead of the wooden training version, feeling its heavier weight settle across his brow. The interior of the helmet, padded with layers of cloth and leather, carries the faint scent of oil and metal, a reminder of its purpose without invoking fear. The weight is steady, grounding, almost meditative. Shields used in practice become a touch sturdier, their surfaces firm beneath the grip. Trainers observe footwork more closely, offering subtle corrections. A shift of weight here, a slower turn of the shoulder there. These adjustments are gentle, meant not to pressure the fighter, but to refine his existing skills with calm precision. In quiet workshops tucked along the edges of the ludus, craftsmen repair or adjust equipment for the upcoming games. The rhythmic tapping of hammers, light, measured, fills the spaces where they work. They smooth edges, polish surfaces, replace worn straps. Their labor, like everything within the Gladiator school, moves with a steady, patient rhythm. Nothing rushed, nothing abrupt. The men who know they may soon face the arena do not brood or gather in tense circles. Instead, their evenings resemble all others: simple meals, soft conversations, quiet stretches of reflection. The games, while significant, do not dominate their emotional world. They are a part of life's structure, approached with the same calm acceptance that shapes their daily routines. Some might visit the medic for small treatments, soothing ointments for tired hands, gentle pressure on tight muscles, or a calming herbal drink to ease the body into rest. These moments bring comfort rather than anxiety. The medics speak softly, their words steady and reassuring, reinforcing the idea that preparation is simply another step in the ongoing rhythm of life inside the ludus. Gaius sometimes spends a few minutes standing outside the barracks looking at the evening sky. The stars emerge gradually, each one appearing with a faint shimmer. He studies them the way one might study a familiar map, not with longing, but with quiet attention. The sky, unchanged by the expectations of the arena, offers a sense of continuity that soothes the mind, reminding him that tomorrow will unfold with its own steady sequence, no matter what it brings. Inside the barracks, as darkness deepens, conversations drift to softer topics. Memories of home, small observations about the day, or gentle humor shared without the need for laughter. These exchanges help anchor the men, reminding them that even within the structured walls of the ludus, they carry pieces of their humanity, simple, quiet, enduring. For some, the thought of the arena inspires a subtle introspection, not fear, but contemplation. They might wonder which stance they will use first, or recall a particular drill that felt especially natural. They may think of the feel of sand beneath their feet, or the pattern of sunlight that fills the amphitheater in the late morning. These thoughts drift like soft clouds, not heavy, not overwhelming, simply present. The calm before the uncertainty reflects the essence of gladiator life, an existence where discipline and acceptance intertwine, where preparation becomes a steady anchor, and where the future, however unpredictable, is approached with quiet composure. And as night once again blankets the ludus, the world settles into its familiar stillness. Another day draws to a close, its rhythms weaving seamlessly into the fabric of countless days before it. As the final quiet hours settle over the ludus, and the day of our imagined journey draws to a close, take a slow breath and let the ancient world soften around you. The stone walls, the sand-covered yard, the wooden training posts, all of it remains steady and calm beneath the fading glow of evening. The routines of the gladiators, though distant from our modern lives, carry a rhythm that is strangely familiar, one shaped not by spectacle, but by repetition, community, and the simple patterns of daily existence. When we look back across the centuries, it's easy to focus on the intensity of the arena, the drama of combat, or the roar of the crowd. But beneath those moments, beneath the public performances and the stories carved into stone, there live thousands of quiet days like this one, days filled with routine. Days shaped by warm meals, slow stretches, shared conversations, and steady, disciplined training. Days where men slept, woke, worked, reflected, and rested, leaving behind traces of their lives that archaeologists would one day uncover and piece together with patient hands. Gaius Primus, like so many fighters of his time, lived within a world defined by structure, but also by subtle humanity. His days unfolded with predictability. His thoughts wandered gently from memory to observation. His relationships formed not through dramatic connection, but through the small, steady interactions that accumulate over time. His life, though constrained, held its own quiet dignity. When we allow ourselves to imagine this world slowly, without urgency, without drama, we begin to see the beauty in its steadiness, the warmth of the evening lamps, the muted scrape of sandals against stone, the soft breath of a room settling into sleep. These details, delicate and unhurried, reveal the past not as a place of constant noise, but as a tapestry of simple, peaceful moments woven together over years. And now, as you rest here at the edge of this journey, let the weight of the ancient world fall gently away. Feel the contrast between their life and yours, the safety of your bed, the softness of your room, the absence of stone walls or rigid schedules. History gives us many things, but tonight it offers a quiet appreciation of the comfort in our present lives. Take one last slow breath, allowing your mind to drift. The ludus grows still. The training yard dims. The murmurs fade into silence. And the past dissolves into the soft darkness of the present moment. If you're still awake, feel free to linger here a little longer. And if sleep is beginning to take hold, let it guide you gently forward toward rest, toward dreams, and toward the peaceful quiet that follows every long day. Allow sleep to carry you away from this reality.